Alrighty, we've got a jam-packed agenda today, so I'll briefly turn on my video so you can all see me. Nice of everyone to join. It's great to have so many of you online again. And hopefully most of you were able to join us for the ENC automation webinar that we did, must have been a couple of months ago now. But today's subject, as you can see, is the paper chart automation side of things. So good to see everybody. So with no further ado, welcome. Let's move on to the first slide. So today's session is all about automated paper charting. There's a couple of aspects to that. We're going to first talk to the new automated paper chart routines that we have. So we're working internally at the moment on some development activity to create an automated digital chart product. We're then going to also speak to how these products can be distributed, so be that in the cloud or via a web viewer. And then we're going to start to break down how all of that works and the new processes that exist in Paper Chart Editor and Process Designer for you to be able to start automating your charting workflows. So what are we speaking to when we're talking about an automated digital chart? Now, of course, we're all looking to make savings and improve efficiency in the way that we're creating our nautical products, be that the vector products or be they paper-based products. And what we're going to be talking to for the first part of this webinar is actually the creation of a digital chart product, either straight from a source repository of data or from a ENC. So we've had a couple of asks over the last year to be able to create products on the fly from a verified source of data. So what we've been working on is within the realms of HPD, of course, is many of you already have your production flows in HPD. So we already have the definition of the charts, we have their metadata, and we have all of its associated data. So from that, we can take those boundaries of those products and then start to use vector data to populate those products. And the way that that system works at present is it will take either an ENC or a source of verified data. It will combine that with the chart definition. And then through automation and the routines we have, it will apply the HPD system files. So that's all of your presentation, all of your sounding rounding profiles, all of these things, and create you a automated digital product. And the output can either go into, say, the cloud, so such as the Keras Chart Data Service, where it's a web viewer, you can see the data on the web, you can download products, you can get notifications, or it could be more traditional that it's on-premise and actually that output then just feeds into your other production pipelines that you have at present. So it's all about enabling just a more productive workflow. So as I've spoken to in that diagram, these are two examples of charts that have been produced with zero manual intervention. So you can see that it's preserved the presentations of these two different HOs. So this is leveraging those paper chart portrayals that you've already invested time and money into and repurposing them through automation to make an automated product. So it takes that source vector data, as I spoke about, it applies the borders, the marginalia, the annotation, it will apply mapping rules. So some clients have mapping rules to pull out certain features for paper products. And then it applies over that the portrayal And then there's different portrayal routines that some of you may or may not be aware of that we use to do dynamic deconfliction of features within paper charts. So we'll just go into a bit more detail about that. So this digital chart generation, as I've said, is derived from E&Cs. It uses your existing paper chart definitions. And then the whole premise of this is to reuse all of those presentations, notes, marginalia, and system files that you already have in existence. So we pull out of the HPD schema what all of the boundaries and what all of the metadata is of those products, and then it's reapplied to this automated product. So part of that scoping and part of that work has been to generate images and to generate those automated products, but with an eye to comparing them against what is currently produced in the traditional workflows at present. So here you can see two screen grabs. On the left-hand side of your screen, you can see the original GeoTIFF that we were asked to compare the automated product against. And then on the right-hand side is the automated digital chart. As you can see, the results aren't too bad. This is literally initial first pass with no intervention at all. So it's generated or pulled across the depth contours. It's applied the presentation styles. And then we start to look a bit deeper into it. And you can see that actually some of the cartographic amendments made to some of the anchor points or anchorage areas is slightly different. So perhaps there's a bit of work to do there. But you start to see the placement and the way that the features are actually represented on here isn't too far off of what would get into the world of a viable product. Where it gets interesting is the text deconfliction, and we're working on that at the moment. So hopefully I'll have some more details to share with you soon on that. But then implementing some textual deconfliction routines that will be able to start to handle the placement and work on a priority-based system, in which case what features to take over others. So this is another example. You can see at the top right, so a couple of slides back, there was two examples of a chart. So this was the chart on the right-hand side with the blue contours. So this is zoomed in much closer, and you can start to really be able to appreciate actually that this particular portrayal catalog that was used in this example is actually really quite close to what would be an acceptable product. There's a couple of issues perhaps around some of the placement of some of the text, but employing routines such as our dynamic cartography, with a bit of work on that, that should be able to start to answer to most of the issues that you can see in and around this chart. But it's a really good initial first pass, and the results are really promising. So when I started talking about some of the routines that you can use, there'll be some questions in a moment about how much you do or don't know about, say, dynamic cartography or cartography and source, or some of the other routines we've got. But an interesting example here, just to bring it up before everybody here today, is things like the conditional symbology that we have in Paper Chart Editor and have had for quite a number of years. There's routines behind the scenes that will read attribute values and dynamically update the text within symbology and within the chart presentations. So here you can see that the conditional symbology of that magvar feature is actually directly feeding off of those attribute values. And the minute you actually update those attribute values and refresh your screen, the text on that compass rose will be automatically updated. We've also got other clients using this that actually they leverage the APIs in HPD and they update those attribute values. And actually they already generate, say, GeoTIFFs via Keras Batch or Process Designer. And the API updates the database. And then when the Keras batch process goes to output, say, a geotiff, because the data's changed in the rendering of that TIFF, it already takes that update. So that update is applied to the database. It's applied to then the resultant geotiff with it never actually being opened in the editor. So these things already exist. So there will be a question later on about whether people are interested in seeing more about that later on, or probably next year now, because that might be able to herald some significant benefits if you're looking to move into an automated paper chart space. So that's the automated routine of generating, say, this digital chart from either ENCs or source, so both vector sources. But there's also an aspect to this about how do we get that data out to who needs it. So of course, it's all about this digital distribution of data. Many of us are looking at it in different ways, but it's fair to say that in this kind of sphere, there's web viewers and there's capability that we have in-house at the moment to be able to take those automated created product and automatically upload them to a cloud or use a third party, and then allow that data to be served up to end users, whoever that might be. Maybe that's value-added resellers, or whether that's the general public. That's completely up to you. But essentially, it allows that data to now be on demand, and there's notification-driven statuses that can be pushed out to people of, okay, so this chart's had a new edition. Those who have downloaded that previously and have subscribed to the service will then get an update that that feature or chart in that respect has changed. So that's really useful and can really help the dissemination of the update of this digital generated product without there having to be that traditional handshake that there's generally been of, oh, you need to go and look at an NM bulletin. Now they can just get an email notifying them that there's a new version of that image. So the second part of the presentation is all about what we have been doing in HPD to aid this automation of paper charts. As I alluded to, hopefully everybody who is here today was able to join us for the ENC automation demo. If not, you can head over to our website and just put in your email address and you can view the webinar that we did a couple of months ago. The reason I mention that is because today I've not got any live demos as such. We're just going to talk through the functionalities that have been put in place, and I'll show you one of the process designer flows of how you can start to join these processes up together, but I won't be doing as an in-depth dive as I did last time. So for those of you who aren't aware, process design has been around for a couple of years. This spans all of the Keras applications, and it pulls together lots of functionality that you would generally use in the editors. So the names of these functions would be very familiar. And at present, there's over 100 different functions within the process designer. And it covers aspects from contour generation to what we're talking about today, which is automating aspects of your paper chart routines, to updating vector products, to exporting vector or raster products. And it brings together all of the functionality across all of the editors. So workflows within Keras HIPS and SIPs or Keras BDB, you can begin to join those together in process models that link to one another to give you an end-to-end workflow. So it's easy to use. You drag and drop each of these functions, you give it an input, you give it an output, and it will give you a result. And the results are posted in the output window, and it will tell you what it's doing. And if there's an issue, it will let you know whether that's a stop there and readdress the data, or whether it will continue. So the whole premise behind these workflows is that you can share them across everybody in your organization. You can send them to other people. It's all about reusing those workflows. And once you've got those tried and tested workflows defined, you can continually reuse them moving forward. So today we're talking about the paper chart aspects of this. So one of the first things that we developed was the ability to create your panel data. So those of you who are aware of creating panel data in HPD, you define the panel. This allows you to do that, and then you can import data into that panel. So that can have multiple sources. It could be from source, or it could use an external file. And all of the settings that you would use within the paper chart editor are within this particular function that's available to you here. For those of you who use the raster chart functionality, so raster bases, there's an import routine here to import a set of raster images. So there's plenty of workflows that see bulk imagery needing to be loaded in, and this allows you to do that using the raster module license. And then we start to move into the next three functions that start to allow you to add your chart furniture. So be that your geographic border, it allows you to pick the style name and allows you to set the scaling latitude and scale bars and things. And of course, this not only uses our own default files, but it will also use your own organizational files if you have them in place. As part of that, of course, you would apply your projected grid, and you can define which projected grid is to be used. And of course, you get to pick the name of that as well. And it's worth mentioning that on these, you'll see for those that have a database element to them, you will see the cylindrical container around them. But those that allow you to use either database charts or paper chart composer files don't have that. So these aren't just limited to HPD, you can use them in paper chart composer as well. And then moving on to the chart marginalia. So part of applying the geographic border is the marginalia anchor points get added to your paper chart. And as a consequence, the marginalia then allows the chart numbers, the notice to mariner fields, all of the supplementary fields around your chart to get populated automatically using Process Designer. So it's fair to say in this particular context, you could actually join these three processes all together when you're creating a paper chart to allow you to cover off these three activities just in one go. For those of you who were at our ENC automation demo, this one should be familiar to you, the apply HPD source to HPD product. So this is the compare product to source routine that exists in the HPD database solution. So this will allow you to update your products. So it allows you to update vector products, raster products. You could do tiled raster product updates. You could do atlas updates with this particular routine. So this will pull through all the verified features that have changed in source to your products. There's a couple of different abilities to run here. You can run it in a kind of non-save capacity so that you can get an idea of how many features are changing. So in the world of people wanting to know how much change is happening to products and things like that, you can get feature counts and metrics on the amount that's changing in certain geographical areas. And also there's an enhanced diagnostic mode with this particular function as well, in case there's some issues with geometry or some such. So that covers off the populating of a new chart, the creating of all of the chart furniture, so the marginalia, the borders, the styling. We're now going to talk about all the different export routines. So a lot of HPD clients for a number of years have been using Keras batch functionality to do mass exports of product, generally overnight, to certain files or folders for downstream production processes or third-party systems to feed off of. So the next suite of enhancements we've made to the process designer in these processes and functions is the ability to export the charts to the different file formats that are most commonly used. And as part of those export routines is the ability to define all of the different variables that were defined in the editor, you can now also do in those process models. So we've got the export chart to PDF. We've got the export chart to TIFF, and you can see that the fields that you can fill out per these are both same and different, and it all depends on the different use cases that people have had for these different formats. So at the moment I'm showing you these individually, but it's fair to say if you have multiple different file formats or DPIs that you need to export, these can all be run concurrently in a process model. And towards the end of this presentation, I've actually got a process model that I will just talk you through of how you can begin to run each of these different things concurrently and allow you to create multiple outputs with just a single click of the button, essentially. So again, this isn't limited to just HPD. These are paper chart composers as well. So even if you're using paper chart composer, you can begin to automate some of these file exports. We've also got that export chart to CMYK TIFF. We've also got the spot separates. So again, all of the user configuration within the editors is available in these processes, and also the ability to export raster bases. So again, talking to that raster module. If you have that module, you've got the ability to export all of those layers in one go. And then also speaking to the raster export formats such as BSB or HCRF, which a few HPD clients have, the ability to export these in bulk also exists for those as well. Okay, so now on to a picture of a process model. Hopefully everybody can see this. If not, please post a few things in the chat window if it isn't particularly clear, but hopefully you can see. I'll start from the left-hand side and I'll talk you through this whole process. So here I've just taken this new functionality that I've just been talking about in terms of creating a paper chart and then applying some of the chart furniture, and also bringing into it the ability to update other products at the same time. So starting on the left-hand side, we've got the credentials to log you into the HPD database. So that shouldn't be of any surprise. And then as part of that, it passes that connection details to the create border process. So most of you have defined borders that you use based on certain scales. So it uses those, and then it will apply the border to the chart. We then move on to the create marginalia process. So again, it's using the previous database connection details, and then it's using the control files that you have set up in your system files and applying those. So here it's applying the data files, the annotation rules, inserting QR codes and all of these things, chart numbers, feeding off of the chart metadata that you've already infilled. Just for example purposes here, I've then taken that very chart that we've created and applied those marginalia to, and then we've run the compare product to source routine. So that's bringing through any geographical changes to that product, automatically applying them, and then it's actually exporting to PDF and TIFF straight away. So that's one flow of editing, entering your credentials, and then it's stepping through those processes. Now, I've chained all these together, but it's not to say that you can't break up these chains. And actually, if you don't join one of these, it will actually stop at that point and actually open that product for you to review if you so wish. So that's just talking through some of the paper chart automation routine of that. Down the bottom, you can actually see there's a couple of other compare product to source routines. So that apply HPD source to. And in the first case, it's an S57 product. And in the second case, it's actually an S100 product with an automatic export routine already in place there. So from that one change within the source database, we've not only created this automated chart, or in this case, we're just creating some border features, applying the change and exporting it, but we're also applying those same source changes to the vector products. And then it's automatically exporting those as well. So hopefully this is beginning to speak to the value that the process designer is bringing to being able to chain some of these processes together. And the fact that you can get to an exported product, albeit not verified, but it all depends on how our workflows are structured as to how that's enabled. But it's allowing you to export a product straight from its update, and in the first case, perhaps not the real use case, but from its initial creation all the way to that product export. Alrighty, so that brings me to the end of this webinar, because I assume there will be a fair few questions, and there are a fair few questions, which is great. Okay, so there was a question about what is PCC. So that is Paper Chart Composer. So for those of you who don't know, Paper Chart Composer is very similar to Paper Chart Editor, but Composer works on flat files that you store on your local machine, whereas Paper Chart Editor works with a database connection. Hopefully that answers that question. Herman, you've asked about chart notes be placed in the automated charts. Good question. We're working on two solutions to that. There's one idea of putting them on separate pages, potentially on a separate page, or we're actually investigating whether we could actually place those notes in areas of dead space within the charts. That's actually currently in research and development at the moment, but hopefully I should be able to share more about that at a later date. Hopefully that's okay. So on to the next question. There's a question about several different types of charts. Atlas or smart crafts, they are similar to normal charts. Would this be applicable to these types of charts as well? I guess it depends to which functions we're talking about, Marcus, but the compare products to source routine will work on those, and the export to certain file formats such as PDF and TIFF should work on those as well. Hopefully that answers your question. Could S57 and 101 parallel outputs be generated employing the process designer? So Jens, yeah, you can run these process models in parallel. So if you had an S57 update routine, you could also have an S101 update routine working through the same process model. There's enhancements coming in the future that hopefully will allow us to much more easily aggregate groups of products to be updated in one go. So one of the current thoughts we're having at the moment is to be able to, so if you're updating features in source, that actually there's a process that will then go and figure out all of the geographically affected products from that change in source. So that's something that we're looking at, and hopefully that's what people would like to see. If not, please let me know. Missed a bit at the beginning, wondering if the automated paper chart creation relies on existing paper charts to establish the marginalia, or is this something you might be able to customize? It's a good question, Brian. So at the moment, we've directly been trying to answer how do we do this in the HPD sphere? But the way in which we glean those details from HPD is literally Python that goes and pulls out all the relevant metadata. So it's fair to assume that that routine that we've created with a bit of tweaking and amendment should be able to glean that detail from a third-party repository of that information. So it should be customizable to speak to whatever the solution needs to be, is the idea behind that. So can paper chart automation be an export format using ENCs? Dion, yeah, that was talking directly to that automated digital chart routine that I spoke about at the beginning. So if I scoot back to the start. So the automated digital chart aspect of this takes either ENCs or source as the input to create that digital product. So it could for sure be that ENCs are the source data of your resultant digital chart. Jens, which major improvements will be included in HPD 5? There's a great question. So at the moment, we're looking to encapsulate a lot of the new S100 functionality in that, so the support for the new standard and improvements to the usability in the editors. There's Postgres for HPD will hopefully be with HPD 5. It's in testing at the moment. I've actually got an instance of it. And had we had a bit more time today, I would have been able to show you some of the automation based on Postgres. There's the latest version of Python support in HPD 5, and there's a whole host of other improvements which I can make available to you, Jens. I can forward you an overview of what is currently in plan for HPD 5. Oh, there's more questions. Will Keras provide a default process designer model as a starting point? So yeah, that's part of what will be in HPD 5 is a whole suite of generic process models that will hopefully give you a good head start for creating these automated flows. But what I would suggest is if you've got my contact details, so my email is just at the end. Let's bring up that slide. If you want some process models and some of the examples that I've shown here, just drop me an email. I'll be more than happy to send those over to you. I think we've still got a bit of time, so some more questions, keep them coming. Encountered a few issues reported, but I get the sense that these are not as prioritized. Are you still developing and fixing them with the vector dynamic masking and the dynamic cartography? Yes, they are on the roadmap. It's just a balancing issue at the moment between the S100 functionality we're trying to get out the door, as well as these vector dynamic and dynamic cartography. But we're more than willing to put those fixes into the next updates, Marcus. Can we still add insets within the main panel? Yes, we definitely can. I noticed the examples I had in those slides didn't show you that, but yes, insets are created as part of that automated routine. I just didn't have permission to share any of those images that showed those, unfortunately. Hopefully, the next time I give you guys an update, I will have an image where I can actually show you the full complexity that we can create the automated charts from. There's another question. Use a process designer to build process models to enable automated chart production. Will Keras provide out-the-box examples? Yeah, I think I answered that a minute ago, Kevin. We will be starting to include examples. That's not a problem. Is there any way to export layer PDF using Portrayal in 1v2? So the ability to do layered PDFs does exist. It shouldn't be contingent on the portrayal. I will need to ask the team. I don't see why not, but I'm wondering whether that question's being asked because people are not sure. I will get back to you on that one, Omar, but I believe it is possible. So Dan, we're looking at different chart catalogs in the same area. We might have fixed paper charts limits in the area, but others we would like the client to be able to decide on the products they would see or want. Is this a future cloud tool possibility? For sure. It's all about reusing that vector data that you hold, isn't it, into the being able to create different products from it. At the end of the day, those changing limits are just that. The content exists. So it's just all about enabling that product generation from that repository of vector data. So yes, definitely. It's a good idea for the future, Dan. Is there functionality to place 2 or more chart products in one PDF in Product Designer? So a bit like creating, so we have Atlas functionality, which does exactly this type of thing where you can start to create chartlets. So multiple charts within one digital file. So iPhone G, if you're able to get in touch with me via email, so I have your email address, I'll be able to give you some more details on that. Tyler's after an update of the HPD5. I figured people were going to answer that. That's absolutely fine. Interested in WebGIS, like the NOAA's custom chart. Is there any plan for you to release this kind of platform? So at the moment, we're looking at just creating in an automated fashion against the routine of the paper charts that are held within HPD at the moment. That's not to say that we won't look at a solution that allows you to define your own limited paper charts. But it's fair to say at the moment, our focus is just on recreating what is in the HPD repository at the moment. Okay, so the last question, and that's good. I think we're coming up to time. Are there any issues for the automation of certain features such as virtual AIS, light sectors, etc.? It's a good question, Gavin. So the pilot projects that we've done at the moment, we haven't come across any issues, but we also have those dynamic cartography presentation engines that allow us to dynamically display and create light sectors and manage those features in such a way that at this point we've not seen an issue. But as ever, more than happy for you to send across some examples and we can work through them. Alrighty. Oh, and there's another question from Marcus. Will we be able to create similar export from source editor? We create images manually each time as an update is finished. That would save us some time. Good question. No, at the moment, we don't have a process to do that, but there's no reason why there shouldn't be. So that's a really good question. And that's definitely something we could look to automate. I'm wondering whether you would actually want that output scaled as well, potentially, Marcus, because that always causes us a bit of interest, doesn't it, from sources unscaled. But it'd be good to chat to you more about the requirements on that. Alrighty, so I think I've come to the end of all the questions. Thank you. 27 questions. You've kept me thinking. Oh, another one squeaked in. Right, last one. The automation of certain charts by products such as notice to mariners have been mentioned already. The system can identify changes and ping the users to tell them. Are there any developments on using this data to automatically produce an actual notice to mariner? Ooh, good question, Kevin. So that functionality exists to some extent already in the publications module that we have. So the publication module's functionality behind the scenes does have a notification mechanism, so it knows of the changes and then creates you your notice automatically. It might be a topic to talk about further, but it definitely exists, but not within Process Designer at the moment. So that's an interesting line of development perhaps we could look at in the future. Alrighty, so I've come to the end of the presentation. I think we're coming just up to about 50 minutes, and I know I've covered a lot of ground. But as ever, my door's always open. You've got my email address there. If you want to get in contact, please do. Most of you know where I am, so you can always get hold of me via email or via LinkedIn. And thank you for your time, and have a good festive period. I will look at doing another webinar in the new year based on the feedback that you've given. So thank you ever so much for that feedback. That feedback's invaluable. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.